This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Mettle Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle Podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle Podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. And welcome back to the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and I am here with my guest today, Brody Walworth. Brody is the head football coach at U-High in Normal, Illinois. And thanks for coming on, Coach.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I struggle during I love to catch coaches in the off season. I'm recording all kinds of stuff right now because during any time of season and you're a teacher as well. I know when we first talked, you were like, dude, give me my head above water here. I've got finals, I got everything else. So it's like, I think this week I've recorded like 5 or 6 podcasts because everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm happy to do it, but I got to get out of school first. So yeah, I understand that pain. Yeah. So, in addition to being the head coach at U-High, before that, you had a long stint at Pleasant Plains. And I think that, but what I'd also like is what I always start with, what's your background in football and athletics? What'd you grow up doing? Because I know that always plays such a big part in a coach's, mantra and how they operate.
Absolutely. No different for me. I'm a graduate of Mattoon High School. So that's where I went to school, played football for Gerald Temples. He was the head coach. And then I was fortunate. I was an offensive and defensive lineman. And so I crossed paths there with George Barnett, who's now the offensive line coach at the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
And, he's now become a friend, but at that time, obviously, a mentor and one of the best football minds and one of the best coaches I've ever been around. And so, I would say, thinking, in the spirit of your question, Gerald and George are two of the biggest reasons why I'm coaching.
Great guys. But so George, I'm a Millikan grad, so I went to school with George. So I know awesome. George, and now George is actively, I have a nephew who's 6'8", 280 as a sophomore. Okay. So George is a good friend of his now. As you can imagine.
I'm sure he was in making the rounds in Bloomington Normal this week. So
yeah, I knew he was.
Mentioned that kid. I know he was. Does that kid throw shot and disc too?
He does. That's my nephew.
That must be him. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's my nephew. He's a horse of an individual. Exactly what they're. Yeah. And he's a basketball player, which I know that's what they love to look. I mean, if you're that size and you can move.
Yep. Multi-sport athletes are big time recruits for a lot of football coaches. That matters to them. But then going back to my, slight history, I did not play college ball. So I played football and threw shot and disc in high school. And I started coaching when I was 19. So the year I graduated, basically I took 1 year off of football, and then I was coaching at Arcola High School, which is where I started.
Yeah.
With Jared Kiger was the head coach there. So I coached for 4 years at Arcola, and actually was small school and somebody
Very
left
small.
and I became the D coordinator my second year coaching.
Yeah.
And so like that learning by fire, I think has been a big part of my career, I guess, up to this point. Cause I was, a D coordinator at 20 years old. And we had some good success at our goal. We made the semifinals one year, won several playoff games. Then when I graduated, I coached at Mattoon for 1 year under Troy Johnson, who kind of like, evolution of my coaching. That was like he was a spread guy, first spread guy I'd really coached under. Um, and then my first teaching job was in Indiana at a little school called Seeger, which is right across the border from
Yeah.
Danville, Illinois.
Yep.
People probably know the Beef House more than they know
Yeah,
Seeger High
absolutely.
School.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's where I coached there, and that was like a wing T offense. So
Yeah.
I was special teams coordinator. So again, I've been a D coordinator, been a special teams coordinator, spread, I formation, wing T, and then I got the opportunity to go to Pleasant Plains in 2012, and I was the OC where Brad Pugh, who was got the head coach, we came in together. He said, "Hey, I want to be a flex bone team on offense." Well, I didn't know anything about the
Yeah.
flex bone, so I spent like all summer trying to learn how to coach a flex bone offense. So did that. So we were running triple option, and then when I took over for him 2 years later, I became the head coach at 2014. We went kind of pro I 1 year, kind of a transition year from the flex bone, and then we were spread my last three, and then we've been spread all U high. So I know this isn't about that, but that's just
No,
I'm
but
saying that because that was my like coaching journey. I have experienced every gamut, and I think that's a big part of what's helped me be where I am today.
well, I think that's because I told you that before we jumped on. I'm like, hey, this is not an X's and O's podcast,
Yeah,
which is perfectly fine. But I think it gives a perspective that I enjoy. That when I ask you about X's and O's, we're not talking about somebody. It's like that because there are coaches out there who've been like, well, I grew up on a wing T and I coach a wing T and it's like, and they want to. I'm like, you want to talk about X's and O's, but really, you only know your X's and O's, right? You
yeah,
don't really get it, and I don't, and so I think it gives you a cool perspective about the difference between changing your philosophy, like your X's and O's, but then also how that affects the stuff that's not X's and O's, right?
exactly. Because I feel like I can be versatile XO wise, but like our number one priority when we think about scheme is who are our players and who are the people we want to get the ball to. And so, and who, can we block up front? Like, what's our strength level up front? And so, like, we're generically a spread team, but from year to year, it varies a lot based on what our kids are like. And I think I can do that because I can get in, you know, tight end wing out of the shotgun and be a belly team, like a wing T team, basically from the gun. But I think that goes to like philosophy stuff. Like, and I feel like that background has really helped me. And I've coached for several people who have helped me learn like the culture part of football, which is what I'm sure we're going to get into because
Well,
that's
yeah, but I
my
think that it gives you the flexibility. I mean, it gives you yeah, you have the flexibility and the confidence that you can it's not about an X's and O's. But if I need to change something, I need to change something. Like I'm guessing when you went from uh, Pleasant Plains to U High playing in the Central State Eight, you had to change some things.
it definitely changed, especially
Yeah,
because the defenses are different. People play a little bit different structure in the Central State Eight primarily compared to Sangamo, which are both great leagues and have tons of great coaches. But definitely had to change kind of some philosophy stuff in order to match what people were doing offensively and defensively. But it's great also because I've been primarily on the offensive side of the ball in my career, but because I've coached in so many offenses, when we face a unique offense for the opponent, I usually know what their goals are because I've probably coached in that offense. So
yeah,
I sit in on the defensive meetings quite a bit too and try to help be like, all right, hey, it's a wing T team. We don't see it very often. Here's what they're trying to do. Here's where our eyes should be. That kind of stuff. So, no, I feel very fortunate with the people I've worked with and the places I've been. I've been around so many great administrators and coaches that have really helped me get to the point where I am now.
yeah. So all that said, regardless of what offense you're rolling into, the summer with, what what do you have to do to make it work? right? Because it doesn't, X's and O's only matter if your kids can do it, right?
Absolutely. And I think the thing we've done really well at U High when I took over is implement like the number one goal was for us to change the culture, because it was pretty negative from what I gather, when I took over, and the numbers were low and the morale was low. And so really what we tried to do was say, when we come in, what's the most important thing to us? It's not talent, it's not X's and O's, it's about how can we build kids into better men, and how can we create a culture where people want to be a part of our program, because football is stinking hard. And unlike basketball where they play 30 plus games, and baseball where they play 30 plus games, we got 9, and we're going to train year round to play 9 guaranteed games, and that's hard. And so how do you sell that to a kid? Well, you got to make sure you're doing some stuff that makes sure not just your top kids have a great experience, but if you got a roster of 65, you need kids 62, 3, 4, and 5 to really want to be there and to be having a great experience, regardless of where they're at in terms of playing time and things like that. And so we kind of, when we got to U High, we established 4 values, and that's kind of like the basis of our culture: family, service, relentlessness, and excellence. And so everything we do should stem from one of those 4 values, whether it's how we operate in practice, right, which might get into the relentlessness and excellence side of things, or like how often we get together to have team meals, how often we meet in the off season. Those are things that are about family, and we try to do some community service projects, and then talk about serving the team rather than the self. I mean, so we try to constantly be living in those values and not talking about winning and losing, but talking about process over product, talking about relentlessly pursuing excellence, talking about what kind of relationship you're building with your teammate. Like, are you willing to be happy for a teammate who maybe is playing over you? Right. Like, that's
Yeah,
serving the team. And so those are a lot of the things that we try to develop, um, when we got to U High. And then we do stuff again, like we do a book study every summer. And so like that is part of our, again, culture building. Like, where do you pick up phrases like sweeping the sheds? Well, we read the book Legacy,
yeah,
which is about the all black rugby team in New Zealand. And so like we've really tried, I'm sure you're familiar with John Gordon,
yeah,
speaker, so on. We read his
yeah,
book Power of a Positive Team one year.
yeah,
So I guess that's like a synopsis of kind of the things I really care about. Obviously, when we're at practice, we're focused on X's and O's, and we're trying to get people to do certain things and develop them as athletes. But really, it's about making sure kids are having a great experience while they're together, building relationships, and then learning how to be a great teammate and relentlessly pursuing excellence for yourself and your team, not one or the other.
yeah. And oh, that, and you just gave me a whole lot there, but trust me, I'm gonna tease it out, right, and get into some of that, because I think that it's how do I put this? So you have had success, and you've had definitely success in growing your numbers, right?
Mm,
So you've grown the U High program basically 100%,
yep.
right? You went from 40 to 80. And football, more than any other sport, is numbers, right? You really, like, the more numbers you have, the more you can, it certainly helps your success rate. I think that what you said, when you're talking about creating these values, doing the book studies, and doing this, and even some of the values you put, probably some other programs have, but it's how it gets implemented, right?
Mm,
That matters. And it's it's like getting into seeing how the sausage was made, if you would, right? Like, when you talk about all these things, it's like, I would guess, maybe I'm wrong, but I guess if you're a coach out there and you don't have your core values, that's probably a number one, right?
yeah. And like, young head coach Brody Walworth at Pleasant Plains, we didn't have values. Like, we had program standards, kind of like, and we had some phrases we used. I mean, I've had process over product basically the whole time I've been a head coach, and how we handle adversity, clocks ticking. I mean, I have these things that I say, kind of on a regular basis to the players. But like, my big evolution going, in my 3-year kind of hiatus from coaching was like this, that's the thing you got to have. You got to have some values. You got to have something to hang your hat on so that no matter what's happening, right? Like discipline issues to us are all about our values. They're not about a set of rules. It's going, okay, like you're not serving our team or you're not relentlessly pursuing excellence, right? Or this is not how we operate as a family. And so like those are the conversations we have when things are going bad as well. And I think that's part of like, I think this is what you were somewhat getting to is like acting on the values is way more important than just having them.
Well, one, you have to have the values,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
yeah, but if they're just something you put on a t-shirt, that doesn't matter either,
Right.
right? So I think that that's a number one, right? I think that as a coach for your program, having your values and having those be really clearly communicated all the time is probably step number one, right?
Agreed.
But then because then it gives you a true north, right? It's like it gives everything has to fit into those values.
You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Metal Coaching now offers professional development for coaches explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Metal Coaching today. No amount of athletic talent or physical ability can overcome a poor mindset. Anxiety, fear, and negativity will always diminish an athlete's abilities and limit their success. If you're not intentionally developing your child's mental toughness, then they are not reaching their full potential. Mental Metal Coaching provides the individual drills needed to build the positive mindset necessary for success on the court and in life. Contact today to schedule the free coaching session and start building mental toughness in your athlete.
Values, or we're not doing it, or
100%. I mean, and like the weight room's a great example.
yeah,
You know, football we're training pretty much year round. Like we take a month or two off after the season and then we're going again. And so like when we ask our guys to get in at 6:30, 6:45 in the morning 4 days a week, you know, that's relentlessly pursuing. That's a value.
yeah,
Cuz I can't punish them for not being there. It's not mandatory. So it's all about how you build culture in order to make them want to be there, you know, even though it's hard to get up, even though it's hard work. And why do I want to be here when I could be sleeping? And that's,
yeah,
2024, like it's not easy to convince a teenager that that's what they, they ought to be doing. But when they care about the people that are around them, when there's an expectation that's been set, when they want to be a part of something special, those are the things that pull them into the weight room, right? Rather than
yeah.
push them away.
Well, when you mentioned 2024, when did you start in at Normal U High?
2021 fall.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so this is right on the heels of COVID
Yeah. It
of
might have
the
been, wait, I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure it was 21. Yeah.
okay,
I'm confident that's right. Cause I've coached 3 falls. Dude,
yeah.
I hate years with football.
I
Cause
no, I trust me, I get you.
21, 2,
So
and 3. Those are my 3 head coaching years at U
so
High.
you were coming in. You are coming in your first year after your hiatus, which we'll talk about in a minute. You came in to statistically the lowest number participation wise for football probably in recent like
Yeah.
since they've been tracking it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because the pandemic,
Because of the
you know,
pandemic and
so they had, kind of bad culture basically. And then the pandemic obviously was hurting numbers because they had to choose between football and baseball in that weird
mhm,
winter, fall, or spring
whatever it
season.
was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I came in right after that. And like the AD told me in the interview, he was like, hey, you might have 38 35 players, you know. And I was like, oh my God. So that was like number one priority, was getting the numbers up. We ended up having 50, I think, that first year, but like that's what was kind of the big thing, was like, hey, you might have 40 dudes. And I think that's what you're saying. Like it was real tough.
It was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I think that it became, you had to intentionally work on it to get the kids back.
Yep. I mean, I was like, I went to basketball practice, you know, summer basketball, and tried to recruit kids from the hallways. You know, I mean, I was trying to get kids out even after school had started. Um, but I think also, like, if first impressions kind of matter, because I like took over in the summer. It's not like I took over in the
Yeah.
spring, you know. So I took over in June, and so trying to make those first impressions with basketball kids, with kids that hadn't played football or maybe dropped football because they had to choose between football and baseball in that weird COVID spring season. So like, yeah, I think that, and then obviously I had a little bit of success as a head coach previously, which I'm thinking helped probably a little bit, but who knows?
Maybe kids don't care.
No, I think for the most part they don't. I agree.
They don't care. They care how it affects them.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm not giving kids a hard time, and I'm not the kind of guy to get in and talking about kids if you're soft these days or this, whatever. Because
Yeah.
I know how I was when I was 17, and I only worried about what was right in front of my nose. Right.
No doubt. No doubt.
And I don't think that's changed. Right. So I think if you want the kids out, you have to make it somewhere they want to be, and something that you just do.
Absolutely. And like, I think that's why the numbers have grown so much since that first year, right? I mean, we were bad my first year. So it's not like
Yeah.
they were watching us on the field going, boy, that's something I want to be a part of. I mean, we were getting blown out on
Yeah.
a pretty regular basis. I mean, we lost every, you know, like, well, I think we won 4 total games that first year, 3 varsity and 1 fresh soft game. You know, I
And
mean, so it's not like they were coming out the next year because they were
no.
so excited to go win football games.
Yeah, and that brings me to a point that you mentioned when I asked you your definition of mental toughness, and you mentioned the voices in your head, right?
Mm.
Which I agree 100%. I could speak till you wanted to shut the computer up about voices and the psychology behind it and the brain work behind it. It's just, I think it's awesome. But we're talking about athletes, but I'm asking you, you can show up, you come back from your hiatus, get into coaching your first year there. I mean, it has to be working on you a little bit. You're like, is this what I came back for?
I've told this story to this player, so I think it's fine for me to echo it on this. I've told it to him personally, but one of my first practices, I remember a kid, like, you know, got tired or whatever, didn't want to finish the drill, just laid down on the field. And I mean, of course, I'm like ready to lose my mind, but I realized that, like, if I can't lose my mind, because like this is clearly what had been kind of like happening. And so like that was one of the moments for me that I was like, what did I get into here?
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, there were definitely some moments, you know, the weight room, 7 kids show up. I was like, that's a wake up call, like on how far we had to go to turn this thing around.
Yeah. So what do you do in what did you or what should you have done in moments of those?
Well, in that moment, I like walked over and talked to that kid personally, right? Like, because I thought if I yelled across the field and embarrassed him, you know, whatever, like, I kind of sometimes think that's still a good thing to have a little bit of that public, you know, hey,
Yeah.
I'm seeing what you're doing here. And I don't like
Accountability.
it.
You still have
Yeah,
to have accountability. Yeah.
absolutely. Um, but in that moment, I thought, hey, he doesn't know. So if I scream at him, how's that going to help teach him what the expectations are? Right. And so I think that was like a lot of, you know, sense making basically with 16, 17-year-old boys. Like, what is our job? What is how do you hold yourself accountable or to a certain standard out here on the field? And that's where the values come in, right? Like, I can go over there, and instead of being mad at that kid for laying down, I'd say, hey, we got these 4 values. I think they're important for our ability to succeed, for your ability to be a successful human in the future. And right now, this is not relentless, and it's not excellence, and it's not serving your team.
It's none of those things. Yeah.
Right.
You're 0 for 4.
Right. And so, like, that conversation, that's the conversation we had, not a screaming thing, not a you're a punk or, whatever. Like, it was like, hey, I see that they don't know. And so it's my job to try to help guide them to that place of understanding and knowledge, and then hopefully self-drive, right, to
Yeah.
achieve those things. And same thing with the weight room, right? I mean, like, you coach the 7 kids that are in there like
Absolutely.
crazy, and you try to help them get better and hope that experience that they're having is like, hey, this guy wants me to succeed. They're now talking positively about me and the rest of the coaching staff, right, to their peers, who now maybe they get 2 more guys in the following week, that weren't in there. And like, that's how it grows. And I mean, honestly, in our 3 off seasons, we're in our 3rd off season right now. I think we probably averaged 12 to 15 after my first year, probably about 25 after my second year. And now we've got to have multiple sessions because we're, in the 40s pretty regularly. So
yeah, and then there you go. But so my question, Coach, is this is a deep dive question for you here.
yeah.
Now that you got 80 kids out, does some of what you learned from when you only had 40, like that's what that kid needed? Does that change if it's a different kid now that you know what I'm saying? Like, you got a kid that doesn't want to finish a drill, but is it like, did you learn something from that you act the same way now? Do you change, or what do you do now?
I think it's a little bit of both, because I think now the standard has been set. And so, like, they know what the expectations are, whereas that kid maybe didn't. Right. And so,
Yeah.
like, I think that's what I have to try to play to in my mind is like, is this a freshman who really doesn't get it? Then I'm going to go have that conversation. Is this a junior who's been with me for 3 or 4 years? Now that's an opportunity to
Yeah.
kind of let them know that
Yeah.
they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Right. And so I think it's just like, people say this all the time, but it's situational. It's about who the person is. Right. And like, if you're a treat one size fits all kind of like coach, I think that doesn't work, in my opinion.
I don't. It's treating kids fair.
Yep.
Is fair. Fair does not mean the same.
Correct. You got it.
It just doesn't. And I think that it's an easy way, like, to say I'm going to treat every kid the same is kind of a lazy way of saying I'm not going to dig into knowing what's best for this kid.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And like, I want to give them the same opportunity to succeed, right?
Yeah.
I want to try to help them all reach their personal potential, but that doesn't mean I'm going to act the same toward every single one of those individuals, because they probably need something different from me and from the staff. And I
Yeah.
think that's another thing in football is like, um, you know, the head coach sets the tone, but we got 10 assistants out there, or
Mm-hmm.
9, that also have to believe in those values, that also have to try to act and operate in that same way, that are separate from the head coach. Whereas, like, I've been helping Coach McDowell with basketball, and like, he's always in the gym. There's 15 or 18 of us in the gym. He can always address something if he feels the need, right? Whereas, like, I may not even know something's going on the other end of the field. And so, like, it's also about leveling our coaches up to be able to do that as well.
Oh, your freshman coach has to know your values and exhibit those probably more than you do.
Yeah.
Like, he's doing the heavy lifting for you, Coach.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, because I'm not, once we get out of the summer, I don't see the freshmen a ton other than at games.
Yeah, I mean, because you can't, now that you've built the program a little bit, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You probably saw plenty of them that first year.
Yeah. Yeah. But I will say, back to your like original question about like treating people with the 80, I still really care about what, our varsity team, I said this earlier, but I'm going to reiterate it. Like, our varsity team's probably going to have, I don't know, 60 guys on it. And I really care about what player 55 through 60 feel when they're out there at practice, right? And like, do they feel like they're still having an opportunity? Do they still feel like the coaches are working with them and trying to develop them? Are they still feeling positively toward their teammates and toward the program, right? And like, I think that stuff really matters. I think it matters for how kids treat each other, right, within your program. And I think that's how you maintain and increase numbers over time is that even kids that aren't getting a ton of playing time on a Friday night are having a great time being around their team, coming to team breakfast. They know the coaches care about them and want them to succeed. And I think that really matters for
So
a
I
program.
agree. My question is, how do you track that?
So we do every off season, or at the end of every season, I do a player meeting with every kid in the program. So like that's my number one way, because it's like pretty immediate feedback. It's
Oh
within
yeah,
a week or two of the season ending. And then our athletic director sends a survey out as well, so that if, kid A, even though I feel like I can handle honesty from a kid, some of them still maybe get
sure.
intimidated by that. But our athletic director also does a like postseason evaluation tool where kids can like fill out a Google form. And let us know what they, answer a handful of questions to tell us a little bit what their experience was. So I think we do a good job at U-High of like giving them an opportunity to speak as well. And then we have, a leadership team, our captains that can navigate that a little bit for us as well. And actually that goes to one point, like that kid that maybe isn't doing the drill right. The way your program's in a great spot is if I don't
Yeah.
even have to say anything. Right. If I got a senior that walks over there and says, "Hey, this ain't how we do it around here," that's when you're getting good.
It's why building culture is so important. It does the work for you, but it takes. I mean, it's painful at first,
yeah,
right?
it is. It's a long road.
Yeah,
And I also think it's important. Like, it's not about wins and losses when you're talking about culture. I think it leads to more wins.
yeah.
But the care we have is not because we're going to win or lose a game in those moments. It's about what are we saying about ourselves and what kind of people we want to be responsible for, right, for training. Because that's the real mission, I think, of a coach, is especially at our level. I'm not in the NFL. I'm not getting paid millions.
No.
I don't have an NIL deal with Coke or whatever, to try to give somebody. I don't have to have a press conference. I don't have to have my Coke bottle up here like Nick Saban would have, So I really do think that's what matters, is how are we building these young people's character.
I agree. And if you were going to have some kind of an NIL deal where you're at, I would look across the street and get an NIL deal with Tony's Tacos just so I could go get. Man, every time I roll through there, it's like that's where I got to go eat. But anyway,
place is good. Our freshmen, I mean, our whole school does, but our freshmen especially go on their free period, get over there.
Oh my gosh, I would just it's way too good. So, talk to me about you took this coaching hiatus, right? And you mentioned something about, I forget what you said, something about after the hiatus, it was about your values. And that struck a chord with me because it meant that you were doing something mentally different with your program than you did before.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll try to make this story short, but basically
That's all right.
I had been teaching for, 7 years at that point. And just in the classroom, not on the field, I felt like there was something missing with my skill set and what I thought we should be doing in the classroom. Traditional public education to me is not the best way to get, again, every kid, not the top 20% who want to go to college, but like my room of 25 kids, what is every experience out of all 25 of them, and how can we help them all reach their potential? I think we're very cookie cutter, very kind of like play for the college game in public ed and not play for the life game. And so like
what do you teach, Coach?
I teach social studies.
Okay. All right. I'm just curious. That keep rolling.
And PE, and I've got a bunch of certifications, but social studies is my main game. So anyway, I just got to the point where I was like, I need more tools. I need a different way of doing this, because I just feel like I'm beating my head against a wall in the classroom. And not that I was like having kids with horrible experiences, but I just thought there was a better way. I thought there has to be a better way. And so basically I left teaching, left Pleasant Plains, left coaching after getting second. People thought I was probably nuts.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah,
that's probably the best. That's got to be, that's their best. That's probably their best showing ever. And like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, I end up
There had
going
to be some stories running around, right?
I'm sure. Yeah, I have no idea because I mean, I left. I was in Seattle, so they could have been saying
Oh,
whatever.
that's what I mean. It had to be like, yeah, who knows?
Yeah. So anyway, I left and went and did a master's degree at the University of Washington. And a part of what I did out there was I got to intern at a place called Big Picture Learning, which is this like unbelievably project based, kind of student driven. The student is a very independent learner kind of opportunity at a school. And so, that's a whole different podcast. So I'm going to like just pin it right there.
No, but that's all right. I want you. Yeah, that's okay.
But anyway, so I had this great experience out west, and then came back with the idea that I was going to kind of work in a nonprofit setting, a policy setting, to try to help make changes in schools. And the more I did that, the more I realized, like, I think you got to be on the inside to really make the change happen and do it the right way. And so that's what really attracted me to U-High, because we're a laboratory school, because we work with college students who are trying to become teachers. And so one of my goals basically now as a professional is to be able to like pass on this knowledge, not to somebody who has to go do a fancy degree program, but who in their like very first opportunities as a teacher get to kind of see a maybe different, more student driven way than kind of traditional public ed would offer them. And so that was like exciting, but also that whole time, to get back to your question, is like I was still talking to my friends in coaching. I was asking them what they do. I still was going to like clinics a little bit and clinicking with other staffs, people that I know and trust, like an Aaron Coons at Williamsville, who's a good friend of mine. And so like ultimately I kind of had developed a plan for, if I get back into it and I'm a head coach again, here are the things that I want to level up. And so it wasn't just about leveling up my teaching. It was
You said if in there, but if you're starting to make that plan, you know it's coming, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I had gotten the doors kind of open for me, was like, if I got the right gig in the policy world, I might have taken it. Right. But ultimately I did really want to get back into coaching, because that's really what I love. That relationship, that closeness that you build with those players over the course of 4 years, there's nothing like it, including a classroom and your staff as well. I mean, it's just the camaraderie that you can build with other humans through this work is unmatched from anything else I know. And so I was kind of missing that part of it.
And then that helped you. I mean, did that affect your decision on like adding these values into your football program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think like, you learn stuff from all over the place, right? So not only am I talking to Aaron Coons and John Hamilton, who took over for me, and Jake Palmer, who coached at Fisher for a while, who's a good friend of mine, but like, then I'm also at Gibson Eck High School, where they have these 5 competencies, and that's literally what their students, over the course of 4 years, they have 5 overarching competencies and then some learning targets under each one. And so like that to me is like values. What do we value?
Right.
They value social reasoning. They value quantitative reasoning, right? And so they have these like 5 kind of big picture themes of what a education should cover, and then have some targets within, and then the students have to decide how they're going to meet those, right? That's kind of like the gist. Well, that affected, I'm sure, me and how I was thinking about what do I care about as a coach, right? What are the like main, what are the what's Stephen Covey say, or the main thing's got to be the main thing, right? Like I think that's a Covey thing. Like you that's what I really kind of learned from that. And so I think I took that back, as well as kind of, the book study came straight from Aaron at Williamsville. And so, stealing from people I trust, and then also using my experiences outside of football to try to help navigate, like, what do I think I can improve as I become a leader of a program again.
Mental Mettle Coaching is driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that will allow athletes and coaches to grow, play, and live in a positive way. We offer a range of coaching and professional development services. First and foremost, we offer individual mental coaching for athletes, and it's easily the most efficient and effective way to help athletes replace fear and anxiety with positivity and confidence. Mettle coaching has helped middle school setters to high school lacrosse middies to D1 offensive linemen. If you have an athlete that needs to improve their mindset in athletics, mental coaching is the answer. We also offer team coaching, which uses the same concepts as individual mental coaching, but applies them in a group setting. Team bonding outings are great, but they do nothing to address the thoughts and feelings that can derail a team. Team coaching does address that, and it's a great option for helping your team grow. Finally, Mettle coaching offers social, emotional learning, professional development programs for educators and coaches. There are self-paced online programs, there are virtual coaching options, and even in-person seminars available. This PD will help increase the mental health of your staff and eventually your student athletes and the culture of your school. All of the Mettle coaching programs have the same goal. Our mission is to help athletes and coaches develop a resilient and spirited mindset that will help them confidently face any obstacles or challenges they seek, regardless of their situation. If you would like to see the same in your athlete, your team, and your staff, contact Coach Thomann for more information. Yeah, and I mean, just it is a great example, and I love what you say. Like you learn the more experiences you have, and the more things you try. Like your coaching football is a passion of yours, but you can dive into other areas and then realize how that helps you coach, right? And
Absolutely.
that's uh,
And there's so
yeah,
much interaction between, I think, great coaches tend to also be great teachers,
yeah,
and vice versa. And I think those people whose like motivation is, how can I help this kid reach their potential? Not how can I win more games or how can I get material A through Z covered in a certain amount of time. That's like the difference maker quality that I see in the, education world. Uh, Almost everybody listening to this podcast probably had an inspirational teacher or coach.
yeah.
And I bet the reason they were inspirational is because they cared about them as an individual, not because they were some master of content, right? Or somebody that won a bunch of games
Yeah.
while they were their head coach. So
It's as I talk to coaches on here, and I because I talk to more coaches now than I ever did before, just doing this podcast and stuff. And it's the guys and gals that are focusing on building the relationships, and I mean really focusing it, not lip service. I mean actually focusing on those relationships. One, they're the people that are staying in the profession, a profession that a lot of people are leaving, right? Because they see it like what you said. I agree. There is no other profession that I feel like is is so rewarding and builds relationships like coaching. I
yeah,
agree. Right. So one, I'm seeing that those people are staying in the profession and not just staying in it, but enjoying it. And two, even though they're not focusing on wins, they get wins.
yeah,
Right.
it's a
It's
byproduct, I think
it's a
for
byproduct.
sure.
Wins are a byproduct, and I don't know how else to say that.
And
Like,
we talk about this. So like I said, process or product earlier. Part of our
yeah,
conversations around that little 3-word phrase is like, we want you to care about how you practice and how you treat each other and how you talk to each other and how you talk to the coaches, because that is going to lead to the product. Whereas if you flipped it around and said, all right, we're going to talk exclusively about winning and losing and technique and whether or not you dropped a ball. When you do lose, what do you have to fall back on? Right? Like now you feel like a failure, and everything's going wrong, right? And so the only way to solve that is a win versus I've got these people that care about me. They're going to support me regardless of what the outcome was. And I think that mindset is so important because it doesn't mean people don't care about winning.
no, of
It
course we do.
it means that they aren't defeated for the next week or look at themselves in the mirror as a loser, right, and a failure because they lost.
Yeah,
Uh, and that's a huge shift mentally.
athletes have an issue with identity a lot of times, right? So, a kid that plays high school football or basketball or whatever, that's what they are. That's like, it is the most important thing for them. And if you focus on process in their sport, their identity becomes, I am a hard worker. I understand how to overcome. I do this. If you focus on product, their identity becomes either a winner or a loser. And eventually, everybody loses eventually, right?
Yeah.
It's somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
because if you are good enough to go on to another college, go on to college or play, like, you're going to lose at some point.
You're going to lose an interview. You're going to lose
Yeah.
a date. You know, I mean, like
Yeah.
there's never going to be a perfect experience. Somebody goes undefeated in everything they do in life.
Yeah. So I love the idea of process over product because I think it creates the right identity for the athlete. It's a great, yeah. I love that connection.
Stole that from Grand Valley State, by the way. It's all stealing.
It's really good.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, they had it posted
Yeah.
on their wall when I went up there for a
I
visit,
mean,
and I was like, "That's me now."
yeah,
You
it's
know,
a great.
decisions over outcomes is a Drew Brees way of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
so
Well, one is one is controllable, one's not.
Yep.
Right. So process and decisions are controllable. The outcome and the product is not 100% controllable. There's too many other factors. So focusing on what you can control is a big deal. So yeah. Wow, we're rolling out of time here, Coach. It's been a phenomenal conversation. I'm going to ask you the last question I always ask.
Okay.
What should I ask you that I didn't? What did I forget?
You know, I think we covered a good amount of ground that I think we came on here to talk about. I do think, you know, you mentioned my my answer in our little pre-podcast online conversation, and talked about this like idea of voices in your head. Maybe we could step into that real quick before we end it.
I told you I could talk about that all day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you'll appreciate, and you've probably heard it before, but you'll appreciate the way we talk about it, which is, so when I was a high school student, and I'm smiling because these are great memories. We used to go to U of I's like multi-day football camp when that was popular, when college coaches actually cared about developing kids rather than recruiting them. Right. And so, that doesn't happen a ton anymore. It does a little bit. And I'm not trying to call out my college colleagues. I know the pressure is like way different now than it was, 20 years ago when I was a teenager.
Well, and I would also say that the high school coaches are doing a much better job of developing the players too.
I think you're right on that.
There's no doubt. They're better. Yeah,
that's a great point. But anyway, so when we used to go to U of I, this is when Ron Turner was the head coach, and gosh dang it, what was McMahon's name? Their special teams guy who ended up being with the Saints for a while. Harry Heastan was the O-line coach. I mean, these are some like kind of old school, old-fashioned coaches that cared about developing players. And so they had a saying they used that I'm sure they got from somebody else. I've heard Jim Harbaugh say it too. They talk about Freddie Soft sitting on your shoulder and whispering in your ear, right when things start getting hard. Freddie gets on there, and he's that voice that's getting in your ear, kind of saying, hey, take it easy these next couple of reps. You're getting a little tired. Don't maybe coach wants you to go to failure. Try hard, but don't take it to failure right here. Right. Hey, oh man, you stayed up kind of late doing homework last night. Maybe we should sleep in and not go to the weight room today. Oh, you dropped that ball. Maybe God, your ankle's kind of hurting too. Maybe you need a little break. And that voice that Freddie's like, that is adversity. That is mental toughness, is being able to knock Freddie Soft off your shoulder and like bow your chest up for the next rep or getting out of bed or whatever it is that he's kind of whispering into your ear and say, no, I care about my teammates. I care about my personal development. I'm getting up and going to the weight room. I'm making the next play. Right. And that's what we talk to our kids about too, is like, are you a failure avoider or are you a playmaker? Right. And like someone that sits around, tries to avoid failure, you're going to screw up because all you're going to be thinking about is failure instead of having a playmaker's mentality, which is like, no matter what the situation, no matter what's happened before this, I'm making this catch. I'm making this block. Right. I'm making this tackle. And so like, I'm getting that rep of a max that I just missed 2 times. Right. And even if you don't get it, it's the mentality that you're going in there to try it again. And that's so Freddie Soft's a big deal in our
So
program.
you're gonna you're gonna regret getting into this because I'm gonna geek out a little bit here with some of the stuff I've learned on the positive psychology stuff. It's super cool, and you'll like this. So
well, I
the
teach
first thing,
psychology too. So
then we can talk about this all day. So
absolutely.
the idea of having a third person voice, right, is like there's a lot of research on how important, how motivating that is, having the third person voice. And I don't just mean motivating, but also degrade, like it can like beat you down. One of the things I work with athletes is we don't have Freddie Soft, but we name that. We take that voice and I coach them through it, and it's a very personal character and name, right? And we talk about that, about how you want to stop that voice, but then we also take and we build that positive voice, and we build a character that is gonna. And I love how it's on the shoulder, because it's the old angel and devil, you know, and it's the idea of you have to develop your positive voice and your positive character. And that's the second part about when you talk about having those voices. It is just like going in the weight room. You can develop that positive voice. It takes reps, it takes practice, it takes effort. And I have all sorts of exercises I do with athletes on purpose, that it's like, hey, you have to get up every morning and speak in this voice, and think in this voice, and write in this voice. And it's going to seem crazy weird at first.
And teenagers,
right?
especially,
You're going to
hate they're like,
you hate it.
They cringe at stuff.
Absolutely.
Like that.
And I'm like, it's no different than like if I tell you to change something in your golf swing, it's going to feel terrible at first, right? It's because you don't practice. You're not used to it. So you like, and that's probably, that's the coolest part. But one of the hardest parts is convincing them that you can develop this positive voice. It can be your dominant voice, but you have to practice it, and you have to get past the awkward phase, right?
Yeah. It's a great point. And honestly, we probably ought to be focused on the positive a little more too, because we're a lot of Freddie Soft and maybe not a lot of
and so
Jimmy Strong or whoever our
Jimmy. Hey, you know, I think that's a great. Yeah, if you want, like, we can talk about this all you want, but yeah, that's the trick is that even as a coach, I think that you can mention Freddie Soft, but you've got to give them something rather than say, don't listen to Freddie Soft. It's like, hey, I got to listen to Jimmy Strong. Cause it's like, so it's that same idea of like, I'm going to go to the golf again. If you're a slicer and you're going up to the tee and I say, hey, don't slice. Like, so but when you say don't listen to Freddie Soft,
right.
You're,
and we
subconsciously
definitely talk about like how building a fight, right? Like
absolutely.
We just don't have probably a name for it. No, but I'm with you. Like I think having like that clear like alternate, right? That would could potentially be even more powerful than kind of the way we do it now.
It absolutely is, but they hate it.
Yeah,
and they're gonna laugh. And whenever I work with teams, that's the first thing I do when we do this. I'm like, hey, this is gonna be awkward, and we're gonna work with it, and you're gonna laugh. And that's fine.
Yeah.
It's a natural reaction.
Same thing when we try to belly breathe or something, you know,
which is
just off the wall for a teenager.
It is, because that breathing, I do breath work with them, and I'm like, hey, the first time we breathe, half of you are going to be laughing because it's awkward. But that's all right. We'll get past it. You'll start to see the benefit, and you'll be okay with it. But yeah. Oh, I'm glad I asked. That was great. I love that. I love that segue into that, Coach. I think you're doing great things, and keep it up. And I love this podcast because I'm meeting people that are doing these things and really working on it and wanting what's best for the kids, physically and mentally.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on and reaching out. It's been fun.
You bet, Coach. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to.
Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your metal.
Just a fantastic interview there with Coach Walworth of U-High in Normal, Illinois. So many things that he's doing are just right on the money from my perspective on what you need to be doing. He's a third year into that spot. I love his entire story. He was a football coach and then he left and wanted to find something different. And he like his motivation for and it was mostly education based, but his motivation to find a better way, as he put it. I love those type of stories when people are wanting to change things. Hey, they have the motivation and they put the time and effort into improving the status quo and improving the way things are done. And I can see it so much in the way he's doing his coaching. He's in his third year there. His idea of coming in and starting with the values and knowing that his culture, everybody loves to talk about building culture, and you have to have culture because culture is so important. You have to focus on culture before you focus on winning. And that's what's interesting is when people always talk about that, they use that phrase, a winning culture, how you develop a winning culture. And it's interesting because the first step of developing a winning culture is not focusing on winning. It's you develop the culture and the winning happens secondary, as he said, or it's a product. And it's hard. But I love he gave some of his ideas on how you can do that. So if you ever hear this idea, you're like, well, how do you build culture without worrying about wins? I think he's got a really good blueprint there. And I think he started with the idea of a couple things that he said, hey, I'm acknowledging that football doesn't have a lot of games. Not everybody gets to play. And I got to find a way to make it be a positive experience for 65 kids all year long, even though we're going to play 9 games. That takes effort to do it. If you're only focusing on the wins and if you're only focusing on the kids that are, the big factors in those wins, you're going to have a lot of kids that feel disrespected. They don't feel honored. And that's how you get a program where you don't have enough players. So you have to focus on how you're going to make it a positive experience for the 65 or 100 or however many kids you got in your program. And one of the ways he started to do that was he started with his values, and he knew what his 4 values are. I mean, his were they're perfectly fine values. He does family, service, relentlessness, and excellence, and those are great values. I don't think they're the answer. I don't think it's because he picked those 4 values and those are the best 4 values. I think that there's a lot of words you could put in there. I think what matters is that you have your values and that they are positive values. And more importantly, they are values that you exhibit. They are values that you hold people up to. They are values that you preach, that you walk, that you talk, and that becomes what you are about. And those values are everything. They take precedence over the winning, over the decisions. It's everything. Or basically, our decisions are answered by our values, and that's what that is. And so many of the things he's doing are on these values, and they fit in, and it's why he's able to start having a positive experience for all those kids. And it's those values for your. And he talked about that kid that was upset, tired, just laid down on the field. The kid didn't have the expectations because it was his first year there, and that had probably been allowed early. You have to have expectations. You have to, but I think your values have to come before the expectations. You have to have, they back it up. They're the reason why you have the expectations rather than just shouting your expectations and expecting others to live up to your expectations with no background, with no reasoning. And I think that the values that you put up and that you live by and that you show allow you to have more expectations, and you can grow those expectations. And it's just a great way to do it. And I think it's working for him. I love also how those values, that relentlessness and that excellence especially, fit into that voice he's talking about. I love, as you can tell on there, I love the conversation about voices and how important voices are, the mental voices that we have and the inner voices. The negative inner voice can be extremely damaging. It can be really loud. It tells us a lot of lies. It's really, it can make a lot of sense, right? It can really guide us in a lot of ways that we don't want to go, and it can make you work against those values that are so important to you. And I think that unfortunately it's natural, especially whenever we are in difficult situations. We put ourselves, it's this, not to get into the psychology and the brain with all of it, but it's easy to want to quit. There's a big part of us that we're trying to save ourselves from things, or we think we are, when we're facing difficult situations, and we just want to get out of it, and we want to quit because we feel like we're saving ourselves from something, but we're not allowing us to reach the goals that we want to. So you have to be able to, quell that voice a little bit, quiet that voice a little bit, and recognize it, and ask it to stop. And then I think the important part is to then find that new voice that you want. And all these ideas of focusing on certain values and acting towards certain values, and listening to a new voice and creating a new voice. This is that idea I've talked about on here before about neuroplasticity. Like, it can be done, but it takes work and it takes intentional effort. It's all part of that process, right? As he's talking about, and I love that phrase he used, focus on process over product. The process is hard. The process takes time. The process in your own mind, the process of your own actions. And then that process has to become something you do as a team, working together to do stuff in order for you to get product and get those results, especially when our results are so binary. Like, did we have a winning season or not? Did we win this game or not? It can be the process is long compared to what we finally get out of it. And yeah, wins are what we want, and wins are great, but they are also, it's one of those situations where sometimes you work years and years and you put so much work in. You see people that they get to that pinnacle and they win those games, and they have a little bit of a letdown, and it's not what they thought it was going to be. And I think that's okay, because I think that is definitely a sign of somebody who really focused on the process over the product, and making themselves better and wanting to become better, and not caring so much about the outcome. I know it's a lot of theoretical stuff, but it's a great way to live. It's a great way to move forward, and it's a great way to think. It just takes, again, some time and effort to be able to come and think that way. And it's time and effort to develop a program that way. But again, the job of a coach is to help the kids get better, create these better human beings. So if you can start to develop some of these things in your athletes and your teams, you're going to make better human beings. And that's what we're looking for out of these kids. So, again, great conversation. I loved the episode. I love talking to Coach Walworth. And as always, do me a favor, like, share, comment, shoot me an email if you like anything I'm saying. If you like anything, something I don't say, by all means, I love the comments. I love having conversations with people about all this stuff. I learn so much when I talk to people about it. And as you listen, if you ever have a good guest for me, somebody you know, a coach or an athlete you know, shoot me an email and say, hey, this would be a great guest. I'd love to have different people from different situations, different walks of life, and different sports. I'd love to have them on. So if you have anything, buddy, send it my way. So, but for now, this has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and always remember, forge your mettle. Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media.
Sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play. And by Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mettle podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mettle podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your mettle.